Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Modern Government, Expanding the Impact of Federal Finance, sponsored by KPMG on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Nikki Reed, a partner with KPMG. Now, Nikki, before break, you mentioned the two key words of this entire discussion, plan and strategy. We know, because as we mentioned at the front end, the CFO Act has been around 30 plus years. No agency doesn't have a plan for financial management. They definitely have strategies. We've seen those. What are you seeing from agencies? How are they kind of taking those plans and strategies that have been around and evolving them to include this modernization effort to really be move from the compliance side to the enabler side?
No, awesome question. And listen, I think the biggest change that's happened over the year around the strategy aspect is before, when everyone was just racing to be auditable and there was this almost 100% focus on compliance and operations, it was very year by year. I think a lot of agencies felt like, okay, we have to get to November 15th and to get this audit out, and then we'll start over and think later. I think today that agencies are, at least the CFO function of the agencies, are following the broader agency and thinking about 5-year strategic plans and really trying to map the CFO org and their mission, their vision, their strategy to that of the organization. And one client that I'm thinking of in particular, I had not seen this done before, and I will tell any client that asks me going forward that it is absolutely genius, is from a transformation standpoint, they actually had a joint operation with the Chief Financial Office as well as the Chief Strategy Office. And so it wasn't just a CFO or finance play. There was actual accountability and responsibility on the Chief Strategy Office as well as the CFO, and they jointly go at this transformation effort together. And when I tell you that it is game changing, I mean that. I mean, the CFO has power, obviously, and so they get the attention of the director as well. But when you have both the Chief Strategy Office and the CFO coming in and demanding certain things, it's been impactful and amazing. From a KPMG perspective, we really look at transformation in what we call dimensions. And so any advice that I would give any person going under a transformation, but specifically for CFOs undergoing financial transformation, is that you have to look at all aspects and all dimensions of your transformation. The first one is service delivery model. And by that I mean, really understanding how in the way that you deliver your services. So that could be, are you your funding model? Are you general fund? Are you working capital fund? That could be your service level agreements. Do you have shared service providers? It's anything that enables you to operate effectively as a finance function. The second would be obvious, people. It's a people organization. Yes, we use tools, but you need people to make that activity work correctly. And so really focusing on people, making sure they're empowered, that they know what their job is, that they're trained appropriately. All of that has to be a real aspect of transformation. The third, we've talked about a lot already, data. Making sure, as we mentioned before, that your data is clean, but that you're also taking chances and moving forward and leveraging data to make really good decisions. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but technology is the fourth. I'll save that for the next discussion. And then we've also got process and policy. I know most CFOs are very, very familiar with process cycle memos and process narratives and all of these things that go with controls and internal controls documentation. But your policy and your process should really be foundational to what you're doing to ensure that you have consistency and that your teams are doing things right. Very closely aligned to that, you've got your enterprise risk management. And then, of course, at the foundation of it all is your program and change management. So those dimensions, folks really need to embrace if they're really going to have true strategy and true change.
So let me connect two things.
Absolutely.
Let's connect people and let's also connect process, because I think one of the changes that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, and I had an interesting conversation with a former CFO at an agency maybe a couple months ago regarding this, is the people are being empowered and then the process and the technology are being changed. So where something like robotics process automation is an example. The CFO world's picked that up in a way that was surprising and empowering. So I guess my question is, it made sense for them to pick up something like an RPA, but it's also getting the people in the right spot. What's happening first? Are you seeing the process changing and then the people catching up, or the people changing, or people driving the change? What are you seeing?
I mean, that's an interesting question, in that
the
I
chicken
think,
or the egg?
yeah, exactly. I've definitely seen it both ways, and honestly, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. I mean, my personal opinion is that in order to enable people to do their jobs better and to focus on, we'll call it the value add activities, you have to let them move away from the operational things, which means you have to get the RPA or the automation or whatever tool you're creating to help them do those things. You have to get that in place first. So I would say, work to make the systems and the tools and the applications do the things that are more operational in nature, more rote, more repetitive, and allow your people to do what they do best, which is be strategists, to think about what's coming next and really bring the agency forward.
The other piece of this, of course, is you have to understand the people side, because people are used to, well, I take from this spreadsheet and I put it in that spreadsheet, and that's what I do all day. And so, okay, you're not going to do that anymore. What? So there's that cultural change is happening, and that is always, no matter what we talk about in government world, that's always the hardest thing. Are you seeing examples, or can you think of anybody who's handling that culture change well?
I can absolutely, and we call that swivel chair, right, where you're taking from one spreadsheet and going to the next. And I mean, you mentioned it, you nailed it. Our RPA and intelligent automation, all of these things are enabling that to be done. And it is scary, right? I mean, change in any respect is scary. But I think the agencies that are doing it right are, taking that last dimension that I mentioned, which is, program management, change management, and communications. They are making that a part of the transformation. So many times we've seen in the past where organizations maybe didn't do transformation as well because they skimped on the change aspect, they skimped on the communications aspect. But again, this is a people business. And if people aren't bought in, and it's not a great tone at the top, and they don't understand this is being done with you, not to you, it will not succeed.
And that was when I talked to that CFO, that's the one thing that they said, which was, the people drove the move to RPA, but we also pushed it down on them. So it was a combination. So let's talk about technology a little bit, because we cannot not have a conversation in the federal world without a little technology. So we talked a little bit about RPA and intelligent automation. We talked a little bit about data. You mentioned visualization tools. What are some of those trends you're seeing in the world of financial management, of them adopting certain technologies and how they're adopting them and moving to that enabler?
Absolutely. I mean, business intelligence tools, we're seeing a ton of even just, your standard accountants really embracing the use of tools that allow them to analyze data faster. I mean, no one will ever stop using Excel, right? And occasionally you'll see some access, but some of our government counterparts are really embracing the use of more effective tools to analyze data. Obviously there's large scale implementations about, hardcore financial system implementations that are still going on today. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, yes, there is a push to go shared service provider, but there still are agencies that are, truly implementing new financial systems. That's not what I'm talking about today. I'm really focused on these technology enablers. So the low code, if you will, low dollar applications that allow you to really manage your data and manage decision making, manage workflow in a more effective way. So there's tons of applications. I won't name them all, but I've seen lots of agencies really, again, embracing that holistically and again, not pushing it down on their employees, but helping and walking with them and training them so that they're empowered to leverage it as well.
Love the fact you brought up low code and no code. That's been another huge change, because financial folks and really mission folks and everyone else who aren't in the IT world, I can't do this coding thing.
Yep.
No, now you don't have to.
Exactly.
It's the old, I don't know if you remember early days of HTML, they had these HTML programs that you didn't have to know how to code. You could just say, I want to have red, and it made red.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're seeing too. You didn't mention cloud. Let's maybe touch upon the cloud a little bit. The cloud services, the software as a service. That's where a lot of these low-code platforms live.
Absolutely.
How are they embracing the cloud?
The cloud. They are. I mean, you have to, right? You know, on-prem is still available. It's still important. It's still, you know, something that we have to embrace. But cloud is the future. You know, obviously from a government standpoint, there are some requirements that a lot of these applications need to make sure that they're employing. You know, FedRAMP, for example, some of the NIST requirements. But I think with all of that aside, you know, cloud in itself is something that the CFO absolutely has to empower. And again, you know, thinking about this new way of working in the virtual workforce, it's even more imperative to have your information available in that way.
And the other side of the coin is not just the financial management modernization that's happening kind of on the back side, meaning the systems that give that data out and provide visualization. It's also there's a huge technology factor in driving decisions. You mentioned predictive analytics, you mentioned business intelligence. Is there an acceptance among the CFO world to take in these tools and use them, or is there a hesitancy because they're financial management folks? That's not what they do, right? I mean, that's the perception that's probably very wrong.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have yet to meet a CFO or a director or a section head or a branch chief, you know, any layer of any authority in a finance organization in the federal government that is, you know, kind of given the Heisman to any of these opportunities. So I think we are ready. I think honestly we have no choice but to be ready, and we will be left behind if we don't embrace it. So
I think that's the key word. You said no choice, because it's like with anything else, technology is moving folks forward, and you got to take advantage of it, because driving that decision, you hear folks talk about accelerating the decision process, and I think it's part of it. Nikki, before I let you go, I can't not talk about the big thing. Part of the CFO Act and part of the federal financial management is the compliance piece. And there's a lot of mandates that kind of fall on the shoulders of CFOs. How do they find that right balance with driving decisions, being the enabler, but also meeting the compliance goals?
Absolutely. So, you know, there are two big changes that are just top of mind for me right now. One, I think everyone is very familiar with this G-invoicing. It's around the corner. Every agency needs to embrace it and leverage it and use it. So, you know, I think that is one of those mandates that you know, everyone saw coming, but now that it's here, it's it's a little bit unnerving. And so my suggestion would be, just if you haven't embraced it, and not just as a compliance, you know, that you have to be on G-invoicing in order to IPAC your trading partners, but really there's a lot of good things that can come out of leveraging the applications that come with G-invoicing. So I just, you know, wholly hope the CFO organizations out there are taking this very seriously and putting all of those transformation dimensions. This is a huge transformation around implementing G-invoicing. And then another one that's coming, it's a couple of years out, but it's the new leasing standard. And, you know, it's following in the footsteps of commercial and then state and local from a GASB standpoint behind it. But it's coming to federal, and just really understanding how that will impact your organization. I would highly recommend CFOs start to think about that as well.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for today, so I can't ask you a ton of follow-up about G-invoicing, because I have followed that with our friends at the Treasury Department, but we'll do that another time.
Sounds
so
good.
Let me thank my guest. Nikki Reed is a partner at KPMG. Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the discussion, Modern Government, Expanding the Impact of Federal Finance, sponsored by KPMG on Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search KPMG.